Brandon Boykin was one of my personal favorite dogs of all time.
Fayetteville, right?
From Fayetteville, yeah.
Yeah, he punched me on the sideline one time.
I think you just got the cold open, Jim.
Welcome to My God a Podcast. I'm Jim Wood. In this episode, John Powell and I are joined by Paul Muchnick to review number 1 Georgia's 33-0 win over Samford. We also talked to Paul about the time he spent with the Georgia football team in 2009, including that Brandon Boykin story, which, full disclosure, was an accident. As always, remember to check out store.mygodapodcast.com to see our latest merch, and you can follow us on social media at My God a Podcast. Finally, we'd love for all of you to come join us at Dog Central. That's DAWGS Central.com. Now, let's join the conversation in progress. All right. Well, we're back. I'm back home from a weekend in Athens. I was able to make it like we talked about possibly doing. John, I know you were not able to make it, but all good. I know at home with Carter kind of being on the mend. And then we do have a third person with us tonight. So teased, I guess, or discussed, brought up John's friend Paul in the preview episode, and we were texting about it this weekend. I know you guys were talking. We're just like, you know what? We should just have him on. Have him on we didn't think about it for the preview, so let's do it for the review. So Paul, why don't you just quick give us a quick introduction?
Yeah, it's hard to match the introduction I got on the preview show, I think, from Mr. Powell there. As John mentioned, a good old buddy of John, Paul Muchnick, happened to have some history with Samford. I'm a Samford grad in their sports medicine department, worked for the football team there, and then went on to Medical College of Georgia in Augusta, and then did essentially a residency, sports medicine residency for UGA, working for Mr. Ron Corson, who is, as you guys probably know, is a mogul, a pretty large, big deal, the godfather of sports medicine there in Athens. So happy to be a part. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Yeah, no, appreciate you joining.
Yeah. I was trying to think off the top of my head how long Ron's been at Georgia. I know he was with the Olympics in 96.
Yeah.
So somewhere right around that time, maybe right after that.
Okay, cool.
But Paul, you were telling me that you took the Ron Corson track, right?
Yeah. So Ron is a graduate of Samford. That was the other thing. I was listening to your podcast on the preview. I was like, hey, there's other fun facts about this matchup here.
Yes. No other podcast dropped that nugget, so you're getting it here with My God a Podcast.
That's right. Yeah. So Ron went and graduated from Samford, went on to actually Medical College of Georgia, did his schooling there, and then, as I mentioned, did some work with the Olympics in 96 and landed at UGA and been there ever since.
Awesome.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, let us bore you for a minute. I want to run through just a quick recap of the game, or not even so much a recap. We're not going to go play by play or anything, but not a whole lot to gain out of that one. I don't think and dissect. I think John, like something that you had said, actually, I think was what I used for the cold open. Actually, was you're kind of laughing, joking about like if Kirby's gonna run it up on his old boss, that things have really changed. And I think we saw he was not willing to do that.
He was definitely not willing to do that. No, not at all. Yeah, it was pretty much how we expected it to go. Although I feel like that one of the biggest facets of this game, which you texted about and my dad mentioned, but like they cut the game short.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember. I know I've seen a running clock before in some of the games like this, even in the Smart era. I can't even remember what year it was. I think 18, maybe. There was one year where there were like multiple games that they did something weird in the second half. I can't remember if any of those had a shortened game or a shortened quarter. That was odd.
I was actually wondering if there was some kind of contractual agreement or if it was something in the contract of the game, because I've never seen something like that either, just where it ended so quickly.
Yeah. Well, and it was kind of weird in the stadium because they announced it and like but you had to like really be paying attention, and it was the ref that said it over his mic, which like when they turn it on or whatever, you can kind of catch it or not. And I think what he said was based on an agreement by the coaches. I think is all he said. So I'm guessing they just talked to him. We're like, hey, let's get this thing over.
The gentlemen's of gentlemen's agreements.
Yeah.
Chris Hatcher and Kirby Smart getting together and saying, "Hey, let's pack this baby in."
Right. Exactly.
I imagine Chris had maybe a couple goals. One was not to have body bags leaving Athens. And the two is just making sure they got paid that $500,000 on their way out.
Right. Nice. Yes, that sounds right.
Hey, before we leave, can we get the check?
Yeah.
Yeah, seriously. Hey, I'm happy to write that check. Unlike some other schools this weekend, I know Nebraska, Notre Dame. Who else?
App State. Who'd they beat?
Oh yeah, A&M. Right? Yeah,
A&M,
none of them were happy.
Wow, that's a rough check to write after you got beat.
Yeah. So on a weekend where you've got stuff like that going, and two FCS teams beat FBS teams. So what? It was Holy Cross and Incarnate Word. They both won, and I know Buffalo was one of Buffalo and Nevada. Now, which team was playing which? I can't remember anymore. But yeah, so it was a overall crazy weekend in college football. So I can live with a ho hum 33-0. I think we were right in that it was a name your score game. I guess I would say we just named the score lower than we had predicted, which is fine.
Yeah, it was absolute carnage. It was absolute carnage to be a top 25 team this past weekend. But yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest surprises that I had was how long it took Georgia to punch one in. If we're splitting hairs over UGA's performance, we get down into the inside the 5-yard line and we kick 2 field goals twice in a row.
Yeah.
After pretty dominating, performance all on the drives. And, I don't know, my dad and I were just looking at each other like, what is going on? Like, and I'm sure Thorson's over on the sideline, and our UGA's punter, he's like, man, why does Jackpot get to kick all these balls?
Right. He did get to punt more in this game. He still looked good. So I don't know. Yeah, that was one of my theories, was maybe Stetson got upset about Stetson Bennett doesn't like Australia, and he tried to help him out a little bit this week. I think I would agree. I would say Stetson looked a little off to me. Like,
for sure.
Now granted, he still threw for 300 yards.
Right.
So,
but he missed. He was missing Darnell. He missed Darnell. He missed Brock Bowers. I think he had one that was a for sure touchdown to Lab McConkey that, like, he was high. He was throwing them high all throughout the beginning stages of the game, which was just maddening.
Meanwhile, us lowly Samford fans were joking on the side after that second drive. I texted my college roommates saying, "All right, guys, two drives and 2 field goals. We got them right where we want them. We're
right?
we're in their heads."
That's right. I mean, that's definitely a win at that point, right? I mean,
And then tonight I get a text from my first college roommate at Samford, and he said, "Hey, 33-0 against the reigning national champions, and we got $500,000 for it. I feel like we just won the weekend." Well, you got a point there.
That's right.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, you guys were able to stop the virtual streak of Stetson's starting games. I mean, he went 7 possessions with 7 straight touchdowns versus Oregon. You guys held us to 2 field goals.
Yeah. It was a difference. I do think, like, I guess as far as like what stood out to me, it was probably the lack of the run blocking for Georgia. Like, I think the backs ended up doing okay. And I have not rewatched it yet, but just being at the stadium, I felt like the running backs didn't have a lot of room to operate. So I don't know, like, make what of that what you will. Like, I think that a lot of people have commented on, like, the game plan was pretty vanilla, Kirby going up against his old boss, the rotation, a lot of rotation going on. The offensive line, like, early on, like, everyone was changed over. I mean, Erickson came in at center very early. It was like a completely different offensive line. So I don't know. They got a lot of players experience. So that's always good. And then, I guess the only thing I'm not sure of, I still haven't heard an official update on AD Mitchell, because I mean he left after like the second play of the game or something like that. It was on the first drive when he limped off with an apparent ankle injury. So I
Yeah,
haven't seen anything from the school, but it sounds like he's okay. I don't know.
Paul probably could give us a little bit of insight on that one. Those ankle injuries are sensitive, aren't they?
Well, and I imagine in a game like that, I mean, if you even sniff an injury, they're taking you out. I mean,
Right.
there's no playing through injuries on that in games like this. In fact, I kind of wondered, Kirby's old boss used to call these games rat poison. And I wondered if what term has Kirby coined for these trap games? What's his
Yeah.
the internal notes.
Yeah.
What are some other things, Jim? Some other things that jumped out to you?
Well, so
I've
one
got
of
a
the
few
things.
more.
Okay. Yeah, I got a couple, not a ton, but one of the things that we had wondered, we'd asked was, would we see Bear Alexander? And we did. So not a ton, but he did it. He did get into the game. So there was a question answered there.
I think I mean, just to elaborate more on that, like from my perspective,
Yeah.
I mean, we've just got so much depth, right?
Mhm.
Like, I
Yeah.
mean, he's kind of in that. Who's a player on the defense this year? I mean, maybe Jalen Carter, like someone that's like just got other guys that are ahead of him that have so much clout, I guess, for lack of a better description.
Yeah.
That's probably going to be par for the course for him, and next year will be his breakout year.
Yeah, I mean Jordan Davis. I mean, people like to compare Bear Alexander to Jordan Davis, and I mean, he didn't really start playing significant minutes until pretty late in his freshman year. So I'm not like I'm not shocked or anything with the depth that we have, but I was that was somebody that I wanted to see. We did, I
We
guess.
did, yeah.
I have like nothing really to criticize with the defense. I mean, it was a shutout. I thought that.
To that point, like, we shut out a team that had put up 530 yards, 52 points, and 416 passing yards on Florida last year.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, we shut out a team that put up those numbers against Florida.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about that. When listening to you guys preview around, I can guarantee you Kirby mentioned that, or maybe even showed some film of that. Of like these guys may not be FBS, but they're still capable of running up the score on some of these schools here.
Yeah, I know that was the thing that Rick used to always say, right? That like I don't care about like what level they are, like they know how to win, like that kind of thing, which I think is important. So,
yeah,
The long snapper.
yeah, easy there, Dooley, easy. I guess the only other thing to me, I would just go back to the offense, right? Again, with like all the rotation, we saw a lot of substitution. We saw a lot of receivers. So we did get to see Dylan Bell get in there. He caught his first touchdown pass. That was pretty cool. Saw a lot of Jackson Meeks. So that was good. I think my only and I think I don't know, John, if you had this kind of in your pocket, because I think we were texting about this a little bit. Still a little confused about the usage or lack of usage of Kearis Jackson. But again, I think we were just cycling through, rotating so many guys. I don't really know if there's anything to look into that or not.
Didn't John post the snap counts? I hadn't had a chance to even look at his now that we mentioned it.
He did. I can tell you. I've actually got it up. But so this game, Kearis only played 14 snaps. Again, not a lot of the receivers played. Or a lot of them rotated around a lot, but like as a comparison, I mean, Dylan Bell played 42 snaps.
You just hit the nail on the head. That's the thing that I was just about to point out, was that our true freshman played 42 snaps, and our senior wide receiver, the unofficial wide receiver of My God, a Podcast, only had 14.
Yeah, so that was surprising to me.
It sounds like a recruiting tactic.
Right.
You can go tell these seniors in high school that, hey, next year you can get 42 snaps.
Yeah, seriously.
That's right. Exactly. I like how you think there. And then I guess the only other thing is just Arik Gilbert, only 10 snaps. So that was a surprise to me, especially in this game. So
I think we're well beyond car wreck explanations on that one.
Yep. Yeah. So who knows? We'll see. I think they were just
Paul, I don't
working.
know if you know, our Eric Gilbert got into a car accident like a few weeks ago. So
Oh,
Yeah.
jeez, no.
Yeah. But so okay. Any other takeaways for you, John? I mean, like I said, I think it was a name your score game. I think we got a lot of quality reps in for the backups, and I don't have a whole lot more to say.
I mentioned it on the last review, and I'm going to mention it again. But our ability to get and gain short yardage on third down is a concern that I have. So we had multiple instances where we were unable to get a significant push. And I'm saying, like, there were certain situations, like I can remember distinctly one where we were probably about the Samford 30 yard line or so. And it was like a 3rd and 1 or a 3rd and 2. And we needed a first down, or, we're obviously trying to get a first down. And, when the ball was snapped, we just had no push. Like we were not moving the Samford defensive linemen downfield like we have been accustomed to in the past.
Yeah.
So as a trend line, we ended up getting the first down in that scenario because a hole opened up, but we weren't really moving people around. And that was pretty consistent from the Oregon game. It was pretty consistent throughout the game versus Samford. And it's just like a watch this space kind of thing for me.
Yeah.
Because I would have expected us to get more of a push against a team like Samford. No offense, Paul.
Actually, I just briefly scanned the notes tonight, and that was actually something that jumped out to me. I think I can't find it now, but I thought I saw it was like 5 for 13 Georgia had on third down conversions, which I found interesting as well, John.
Are you talking about the stats from
Yeah.
that Jim linked out?
Yeah, I can't find it now, but I'm pretty sure I saw it earlier that Georgia was like 5 for 13 on third down conversions.
No, you're correct. That is correct. Yep.
Is that what it was? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
That is pretty low.
That's pretty low for a Samford type team. But yeah, I also didn't know if in the context of that was that the second or third string that was in at that point either. So I don't know if all of that was on the first string.
Yeah, I would say it was a mix. So that was the thing. Like we kept a lot of the first team skill position players in for a while. But although there still was a rotation, right? Because we already said AD Mitchell was out. But the offensive line was rotating early and often. Like the starting 5 was not in there very long. They came back in. They started but they would put the second team line and then first team back. There was a lot of rotation. So that was interesting. But I kind of wondered, like, I know I've heard Graham say that the play calling was pretty vanilla. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is, I mean, again, like you've got that, like the motivation factor. I've seen us do this before in years past where we're playing in a game like this and you get super concerned about the offensive line. They're like, where's the push? But then there is one, the next week or whatever against a different opponent. But your point about that there wasn't really there against Oregon either. That is true. I hadn't even really thought of it that way either. Because I'm always trying to like talk myself out of being worried about things now. But you're right. I mean, we didn't
trust.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, because we did not run the ball super effectively against Oregon either. But that I felt like that was the scheme. That's kind of what we were doing. Here, you would kind of want to be able to see, we've got the third and short or whatever. Just line up and hand the ball off and get the first down, and we didn't really see that.
Yeah, we haven't done the preview episodes and things like that. But like as we go through the season, looking at some of the defensive stats, we'll probably do that. I'll probably do that for the South Carolina preview. But as we look ahead with some of these other teams that we have coming up against, as their defensive lines get tougher as we get deeper into the SEC schedule, I'm definitely going to be observing that more closely.
Right.
But yeah, that's the other thing that I had.
Okay, cool. Well, I want to get to some of Paul's stuff. So let me run through 2 things quickly. One, recap coaches over unders. John crushed me this game. John went 5-3 with coaches over unders. I went only 2-6. John now has a commanding lead on the season, 11-5. I'm 7-9. And quick shout out, I did see Coach Trillbill at the game. We were able to sync up and have a nice talk. And John, by the way, he confirmed that if you push on a half, he's going to mark it wrong. So so that was there. And then also, I did make it to Hug Dog's tailgate. My dad and I went by there. He is a very gracious host, he and his wife, Dana. So, Jason, if you're listening, thank you so much. We had a blast, and it was great to meet you in person.
Super jealous. Super jealous. I'm going to make it down there. I'm going to make it down there to the Tate Center at some point. Paul will probably have an opportunity before any of us because the big time sponsorship over here. Your son actually went to the game, as I recall, right?
I mean, I was I had actually had our company tickets for this game and gave them away Friday night, and then I don't know, 4 hours before the game started, a buddy texted and invited one of my sons to go. Of course, I couldn't help myself. I put him in one of my Samford hats, sent him to the game, and luckily he didn't get poked fun of. I asked the guy that took him. I said, "Did anybody mention anything to him?" And I think everybody was pretty nice to the poor old Samford fans.
I did. Hey, I saw some Samford fans. That's good. That was cool.
I feel like there's a lot of Samford folks. Like you're not the only one that I've heard of around here that has gone to Samford. A close friend of my wife's, their daughter plays softball at Samford. So it seems like it's a pretty desirable place to go to. Pretty chill location.
Yeah, it's a beautiful area in Birmingham, but yeah, we'll have some opportunities to go over there, John. If we get extra tickets, or we'll have to figure out a way to get you over there. We're doing big recruiting. We're doing a big recruiting event for the Auburn game. We got, I think, 40 or 50 people going over. So Jim, if you're around, maybe I'll have to sneak over and see it at the tailgate.
Yeah, that's a good tailgate that Jim's talking about. We got a couple of them. Get a couple good spots for you. But we can work out a sponsorship deal here.
hey, BT Solutions, not only of the Bulldog Brunch.
Awesome. So Paul's going to regale us in some tales, right?
As we often do, we start talking before we hit the record button. And John had a "should we be recording" moment, which we often do. And I'm going to repeat, Paul, I'm going to lead you into this with what you said. And I got to tell you, this really made me excited because I've always wanted someone to say this to us, was that you were yelling at the podcast, which I love because that is how I listen to podcasts. And so I'm so happy to know that we now have had at least one person do that with us. So what was it that you were yelling at us about?
Yeah, there was a couple things.
It was Hold on, let me go to my notes.
Yeah, I happened to have a notepad when I was listening to it.
Amazing.
It was kind of fun to listen because Jim, I think you were asking a couple of questions around the history of the rivalry and just some of the connections between Samford and UGA. Mm-hmm. The one I think you had asked a question around Mark Rick's or I think it was Mark Rick's mentor. Mm-hmm. And John, I think you answered Bobby Bowden, and I'm thinking I was screaming, there's a massive statue of Bobby Bowden on the campus of Samford right outside the stadium.
Oh, amazing.
And when I was doing my work with UGA on the sports medicine team, that was when Mark Rick was there. And Mark Rick would always somehow interweave a Bowden story into his talks, or there's a few times that he and Catherine would hang out in the training room, and we would he'd have some kind of story, and there was always seemed to be some kind of woven theme of Mr. Bowden. So I'm like, yes, it's Bobby Bowden. That's the connection, and that was comments. The other was around the 1-0 or the 2-0. The history of the rivalry, and and I was screaming, it's because they were Howard College.
Yes.
Funny is later in the podcast, and I don't know, John, if you realized at the time, but you kind of answered the question and saying,
I didn't. Yeah, when I dropped that, you mentioned that, I was like, oh yeah, I'm an idiot. That's probably, I didn't put two and two together.
I didn't. I put it together afterwards. So I actually wrote a blog post on Dog Central. So I have a blog on Dog Central. This is the time where we mentioned, hey, you guys everyone should go and subscribe to dogcentral.com. But I put that together later. So I had that it was like Thursday night. I was like, wait a minute, Howard College. So I actually did a Google search for Howard College Georgia Bulldogs, and I actually found it. It was in the Samford pregame notes, which I don't think had come out yet when we recorded, and it was right in there. It said it. It said, while it basically laid it out, right? Played once against Samford, once against Howard College. So yeah, eventually figured it out, not while we were recording, though.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Yeah. It's one of those moments like, who do I call? Like, oh, wait, I'm listening to a recording.
We're a dial-in show.
Yeah. I love it. And then the third was kind of what I already mentioned about the connection between Ron Corson. That was a big one.
That's a big one. That should not be overlooked.
Yeah, and if you know Ron, he has an extremely special place in his heart for Samford. And of course, when I was at UGA doing my work, another buddy of mine, Ben Seagraves, was there with me, and he always used to kind of poke fun at me because everybody thought that I was the favorite resident because I was from Samford, and Ron had a special place in his heart for Samford. I was like, I didn't know that.
Oh, that's awesome. I would say, what years were you? When? So you said it was in the Rick era, right around.
Yeah, it was. You guys will know this well. The Joe Cox final year.
Oh, okay, yeah.
That was the year. Yeah, that was quite a rough year. That was Stafford was a rookie in Detroit. I actually got to hang out with Stafford one night. He was back for rehab. That was the year I think he hurt his knee that rookie year.
Okay.
And got to know Joe. And unfortunately, when I say I got to know people, it was usually an unfortunate thing because that means they were probably hurt a lot that year. Aaron Murray was a freshman. He was sort of I think some people knew of him, but people obviously didn't know what he was capable of doing in the years after that. He and I got to know each other. It was when he was rehabbing his shoulder, and his brother. That was also when his brother was there, Josh Murray.
Yeah.
And that was an interesting, fun dynamics to see the two of them engage. It was a great experience. I joke with people that experience, working with the Samford football team, as we've talked about, is maybe a slightly different level of football. And then going to UGA and working with those guys, I joke that in a lot of ways, it actually prepared me for my future career and my future in parenting. I have 5 kids, Jim.
Okay. So you guys have something. John's almost there. You guys have that. You guys have a lot to talk about between the two of you in that department.
Exactly. But I often make the joke that being an athletic trainer and being on the sports medicine team with UGA and these elite athletes was a lot like parenting, that in one moment you're kind of frustrated that they're not doing some of the things that you want them to do, with all the talent and all the potential. And then the very next moment they're like making you this big proud, you're so proud of them. And my wife, it's kind of like the dichotomy and the roller coaster of being a parent. One moment you want to strangle them because they're not doing what they're supposed to do. And the next moment you want to hug them. And you're just so ecstatic for the accomplishments that they're getting after working with them. So, I joke that I could probably write a book with some of the stuff that happened behind the scenes and things that, you don't always, as just a normal fan, you see and you think what's going on behind the scenes. And then when you get there, it's quite an interesting party.
Yeah. So I'm trying to think. So that would have been 2009. That was the Cox year. And I believe Aaron Murray and Zach Mettenberger both redshirted that year, which again, sign of the times that you can sign 2 quarterbacks in the same class like that. I mean, that would never happen again.
Yeah, seriously.
But yeah. Okay. Just making sure I get my timing right. Yeah, I remember, there were a lot of, hey, why aren't we switching? There was a lot of Joe Cox hate, which I was always, I was a bit of a Joe Cox defender, actually. Guy threw like 5 touchdown passes at Arkansas. I didn't feel like he was the problem. But anyways, we don't need to rehash that.
I as I said, I could probably tell stories and stories. My two probably favorite stories from that year. One was, if you guys remember, the bird flu was kind of going around during that era. And I always remember, this is one of those things where you kind of look at what's happening, and then you realize there's things happening behind the scenes. I remember, I'm sure they do something level of like this, but on Mondays we would have the injury report, and we would talk through the injuries. And then there was a completely separate section of like, okay, how are we going to filter this through to the media? How are we going to, in the medical world, they call that protected health information, or PHI,
Yep.
or HIPAA compliant, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But at the time, I can say this because it's, 14 years later, but at the time, Joe actually had whatever, I think it was swine flu or bird flu at the time. But we kind of had to keep it quiet from the media. And that was, if you guys remember, the Oklahoma State game that year. Mm-hmm. And so me and my buddy that was there with me, Ben, were called in, and we actually had to escort Joe on President Adams' private plane, separate from the team, in an effort to make sure that the rest of the team doesn't get the flu or whatever. And I can remember it was probably one of the most nerve-wracking events of my career, even to this day, because we get on the plane, this small little private plane, and Joe, the starting quarterback of Georgia, gets on, pulls the tray out, and gets his hand caught, his throwing hand, caught in the tray, and just acts like he's like writhing in pain. And of course, Ben and I look at each other thinking, this guy just broke his hand, and we're losing our jobs, and we're going to be all over media for allowing this to happen. Long story short, he ended up being fine. But
yeah,
to your point, it was amazing because Joe was one of these guys, and a lot of these kids are, that he was just a good old boy, mm-hmm. looking forward to hunting and fishing after the game. And you think to yourself, the magnitude the pressure that's on these 19, 20-year-old kids, when really, if you sit down with them, they're good old boys that want to be hunting and fishing, and at least Joe was. Of course, nowadays right. A lot of guys are looking forward to the NFL.
Right. Yeah. No, I think from similar mold there.
From Ryan Rankin, I mean, a number of those guys. I can just imagine a young Paul just sitting there watching Joe Cox writhing in pain, like, oh my God.
Yeah. I do remember that he was sick. That at least did come out. I don't know that we knew that it was.
I don't remember. I don't remember that at all.
I already forgot. Was it bird flu, swine flu? What was it?
Yeah, I think it was the bird flu. It was 2009, right. So we could go back and look. But yeah, I just remember we had to be somewhat kind of hush-hush about it. And, there's so many stories. There's many other stories even from that game. Ron Corson is, and I think still is, but was really big on IVs. If mm-hmm. kids even sniff the idea of getting a cramp, he's very quick. He was one of the pioneers in this kind of concept of doing IVs for it. But during halftime we had like half the team on IVs, and we were supposed to go out for kickoff. And one of the coaches popped his head in and said 10 minutes. Well, we thought that was 10 minutes until we go out. That was 10 minutes till kickoff.
Oh no!
So we look up at the monitor and we got half the team on IVs. And most of them are on the kickoff team, so it's like a war zone running through there, and
just yanking needles out of people's arms.
You can do this in a hospital. Luckily, we're at UGA. So,
all right. So now that I know it was this year, I have a question that I have to ask.
Okay.
So and this is not a medical thing, by the way. So don't. Okay. We're not going to violate anyone's HIPAA. In 2009. There is an infamous game that season related to something that we tend to talk about on this podcast from time to time. We are members of #Uniform Twitter.
I know where you're going with this.
So the black helmet, red face mask, black pants cocktail party. Like, is that a kind of thing? Like had you caught wind of that? Is that something that you had known about before, or are you as surprised as everybody else?
So this is actually a story I was just telling a buddy of mine about a week ago or so. That game in general had a couple stories for it, but I'll start with uniform. As you can imagine,
I love actual uniform inside sources.
Oh man! So the short answer is the medical staff. We did not know about it until we all went out on the field and we were warming up, and one of the equipment guys came and grabbed us and said, "Hey, y'all come back into the locker room with us." And we were like, "What's going on?" We thought something was wrong. We get in there and they're having us and all the assistant coaches, all the guys that were not involved in the warm-ups, the medical staff, the equipment guys, go through and switch out the helmets and switch out all the, I think it was black helmets and black jerseys, right?
It was black helmets and black pants and
Black
white
pants. Okay,
jerseys.
yeah. And so we're rummaging through there, and we had to do it strategically in a way that at the in Jacksonville at that stadium, our locker room was constructed in a way that in the back half of the locker room there was a huge shower, and the team was going to go in there and do their like pregame ritual prayer and things like that. Mm-hmm. Well, so they came in. We were switching some things out, but we had to be super discreet about it. They went into the back. We switched all their helmets out, all their pants out, and they came back into the locker room. And I tell people, you'd have thought that they just won the national championship. I mean, they were going nuts and just crazy. And if I remember correctly, this was after the Auburn game, right?
It was 2 years. Yeah, it was 2 years later.
And we were all kind of like, I thought that a few of us were kind of like, whose idea was this? This doesn't seem like, and that was, Tebow was with Florida, and we felt like we didn't have a great shot of winning that game, those of us that were realistic at the time. And so we thought, oh, well, maybe they're just trying to pull something out of a hat here or whatever. And, as the story goes, they went out on the field and, the crowd went crazy, and then we proceeded to get just railed. And it did not go well. But I remember in that game specifically, you mentioned something about not everybody being a Cox fan. But Logan, you guys remember Logan Gray?
Yeah. Logan Gray, yeah.
So they
the king of the fair catch.
We would throw him out there to return punts for some reason, and he would fair catch.
Yeah. They put him in, and I don't remember if it was because the game was so far gone or if they were just trying to figure something out and try something new. But he got in there and he threw a pick, his first throw.
Yeah.
And I remember very distinctively on the bench, we turned around and two Georgia fans got into a fight because they were yelling. Like one fan was yelling at coach and one fan was yelling at like Logan Gray, and it was just a mess. I mean, people were pretty upset across the board. But then another Georgia fan is like trying to defend him, and so they get into a visual fight. And I remember we're all looking behind us going, this is not good. We're losing on the field and our fans are fighting each other in the stands.
That sounds about right.
I blame the black pants.
Yeah, it was. Remember, we were thinking, I bet we don't see any change in uniform for a while.
Yeah, because that was after the successful blackout against Auburn, right? That was the first big one. But then it was actually the next year. It was 2008, the year before you were there. 2008 was the unsuccessful blackout of Alabama. And so that already put a bad taste. And then the black helmets against Florida was a nightmare. So that's where the don't mess with the helmet crowd comes from. So the uniform police grew substantially between 2008 and 2009.
Yeah, that was. I remember thinking, we were all talking, it seemed like a bit of a stretch at the time, but who were we to say,
right,
try new things.
Right.
Yeah. Go back there and do that PT stuff.
Get tape the ankles and get the kids ready to
play. That's funny. What other? So you were only there for 1 year, Paul?
Yeah.
For some reason, I felt like it was a couple of years.
It felt like a couple of years for me as well. It was a long season. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was just one essentially kind of. Because I was a certified athletic trainer, I was able to do my residency for physical therapy school there. And Ron, having the connection there, it was a 1 season thing. So, which was, John, this at the time, it was a good thing it was only 1 season because my wife was living in Atlanta and I was living in Athens. So it was a hard thing on a marriage for 2 or 3 years in there.
Yeah. I can imagine Natalie not being appreciative of that one. So we had, when was David Wright? When was David Wright the trainer up there? Was that the same time?
Well, I mean, he was like a student trainer when we were in school, actually. But
I got my timing mixed up. Yeah,
well, he was when we were in school, but I mean, he's done a lot of stuff. I mean, he listens, by the way. So hey, David.
What's up, David Lee?
David is now yelling at the podcast.
Yeah, seriously.
He's probably. What year was he there? Was he there when I was there?
No. So he's our age. Well, I'm a little bit older than John, but so he graduated with me. So he was at Georgia like 98 to 02 is when I was at Georgia.
Okay.
And so I know he was a student trainer while we were there.
Yeah.
But then I'm not sure that he was ever back directly with the school, but
For some reason I thought he was.
Well, he's in Athens still. So, or the Athens area. I'm probably getting his like official city name wrong. Sorry, David, but I know, I know he's in the general vicinity still. So
yeah, he's probably got some good stories too.
Yeah.
He does.
So you had mentioned you had a doozy of a story that involved Kirby Smart, as I recall, right, Paul?
Yeah, sort of. It's so the connection I have with Kirby is sort of through a guy I went to grad school with. So Kirby's wife, Mary Beth, I think is her name.
Yep, Mary Beth. Yep.
Mary Beth's cousin is a good friend of mine from PT school. So there was some connection there, and his name's Kerry West, and Kirby came to Kerry's wedding, which we were all at. So I briefly met him there. But when we were in,
hold on, did you leave him by himself like Jim did at another soiree?
I feel like there's a story there.
There is. We'll tell you that when we hang up, so our listeners don't have to listen to it again.
But when I was the connection there was in Augusta when I was in school there. Kirby called Kerry when he was with Alabama and said, "Hey, Saban's got to come to Augusta and visit a recruit." I think it was Washington, last name Washington, offensive lineman.
Okay.
This would have been in 08, 7 or 8. But Kerry called me, and Kerry didn't have a great car at the time. And so he called me. Of course, I didn't have a great car either, if that tells you anything about how Kerry's car was. But I had like an older Lexus SUV. And so Kerry called and said, "Hey, I've got to go pick up Nick Saban at the airport in Augusta. I need a nice car. Can I borrow your car?" And I was like, "My car's not that nice, but sure." So we were going out of town the next day, and I was cleaning the front seat and whatever, and there was a rip in the leather, and I didn't realize it, and I'm freaking out, driving all over Augusta trying to find a cover. There's a whole lot more story to that, but long story short, I finally found a cover for it to put over the leather because there was a massive gaping hole in the leather where I'm thinking Nick Saban is going to sit, and he's going to lose his mind if he has to sit in a seat that has a rip in it. And so come to find out, when he went to pick him up, their offensive coordinator was the one that sat in the front, and Saban actually sat in the back. So I went and visited, and then I asked if I could like ride along with him, and they said no, of course. But the only thing I got out of it was I think Saban gave us some game day Alabama shirts. So it still sits in my closet. I don't think it's ever been worn, but it's my token Saban gift for borrowing my car to go visit of course, nowadays I joke that they don't need cars from petty people like me. They use helicopters to
seriously
ride around.
Yeah, the Kirby copter is very well known.
Yes,
I'm like just absolutely flabbergasted that they had some like random folks just pick up Nick Saban as opposed to just calling a limo service. Like that to me,
that was a point of discussion, but they didn't want media to catch hold of it, and they didn't want like they actually didn't meet some random guy that they didn't know. So it was Kirby's distant relative that they actually knew and they trusted.
Right.
So this is the 3D recruiting chest. We're getting windows into the 3D recruiting chest.
I say this is part of # the process right here.
Process.
That's amazing. Okay, as we were talking, I was frantically trying to pull back up the 2009 schedule. You were definitely there for a heck of a roller coaster of a year. Oh my gosh. Let me just remind I'm going to rattle off a couple of other things that happened that year. We lost to Kentucky. And I remember like we lost late, like we could have tied it up and we fumbled.
Like Florida did this past weekend, Jim? Florida?
Nice segue. Very good. I can't believe we didn't mention that. That was pretty awesome. It was also the year where we lost to LSU off of there was like a crazy, like horrible celebration penalty called on AJ Green. Or at least that's
right. I remember that.
We had tied the game. And then like there was a crazy celebration call, and then
I think that was the game too that Bakari Rambo. You guys remember Bakari Rambo?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
He got somehow drilled in the head, or he hit somebody. He had a
Oh yeah.
major head injury, and I think we actually had to spine board him that game.
I do remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that
Were
happened.
you on the field for that?
Yeah, I was.
Wow. We can go back and look at that one.
I want to say that was Auburn, but I could be wrong.
Oh yeah,
I do think that was Auburn.
it was so. Yeah, it was a home game. I remember that.
It was a home
Auburn
game.
and LSU both home. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Um,
And it was
yeah.
pretty like early in the game, I think. Whatever. That was a long time ago. But yeah, for sure, I do remember that. Yeah, he was pretty young at that point, I think, actually. Like he may have been he had to have been like a freshman or sophomore.
Yeah, so we're on the field, and because I distinctively remember, even though this was like 14 years ago, I was standing next to David Pollock, who had come onto the field just to kind of check it out, and David proceeded to tell me about his injury. If you guys remember his injury in the NFL,
Yeah,
and basically ended his career.
right.
And so he was telling me all the details of that. And I'm thinking to myself, like, let's not put the cart before the horse here. Like, we don't know
Right.
what actually happened to Bakari yet. Let's just, it obviously was a bad head and neck injury, but
Yeah,
it was pretty brutal.
man. Yeah, but I mean, he obviously, full recovery because he went on to play in the NFL. Bakari did.
Mm-hmm.
I can't imagine how quickly are you guys able to assess like the severity there? Like, is it like instant? You're running out there when you see something like that, or
Yeah, you guys. I don't think we see this as much anymore in the game because of the targeting. But if you guys remember, when guys would get hit, they would do what's called posturing, and their arms would go up in the air, or like they call it fencing posturing.
Mhm.
And if you go back and look at the film, we looked at it, and Bakari had both arms posturing in the fencing. So he got hit, his body went rigid, and both his arms went in the air. And you know right away what that means. You just don't know if it's if the spinal cord is damaged at all at that point. So you're kind of holding your breath, but it's a pretty severe concussion head injury.
Okay.
But we don't see those much anymore in sports. Because of just the protection that they have on those, those guys. Was it Massaquoi that one year that got hit coming over the center of the field where he just got laid out? You don't see those kind of hits anymore.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. It was a different number one, but your guy Ron Corson, I know it was Reggie Brown. It was in 2004.
I was say it was Reggie
when
Brown.
It happened. It was at Auburn, and I know Ron was the one that went around the country showing that that was the hit that he used. I mean, he played a big role in the targeting rule being created, if I recall correctly.
That's what I was going to tell you too at the beginning. If I left that out, is that Ron, not only is he like a pioneer and like the godfather of sports medicine, but in the head injury world, he's known as like one of the main guys that has gone around. They call it the Heads Up program, but he has people from all over the country come to Athens where he speaks, and then he goes all across the country. But he's been a huge proponent. He was one of the early guys in putting the sensors within helmets in Athens to study the impacts over time within these players. But Ron's been a huge mogul in that industry.
So when those of us are getting upset and yelling at our TVs about targeting, I think you would argue it's a good thing.
Yeah. The latest research on concussion. John, you mentioned this in the preview. That's the other point. I wasn't quite yelling at but I was kind of talking to the podcast, going, it's called CTE.
Yeah.
The concussion, and all of the latest research points to some significant protection of kids these days, which is good. It's good for the long-term trajectory of our youth.
Right.
I haven't talked to Lindsay about this, so if she hears, but it's actually gotten me thinking, because Carter plays goalkeeper. I've actually thought about putting him in that headgear. Someone jokingly was asking me, is he going to have to wear that funny headgear? And I was like, well, honestly, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, something to consider.
They look exactly like the headgear that they wrap the players' helmets in for practice.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah. I hadn't seen that. So they'll do that for soccer, for keepers now?
Peter Cech, who plays for Chelsea, which if you can Google that, like he wears this headgear because he had a pretty substantial concussion, similar to Carter's thing, where he got clobbered, and so now from now on he wears a permanent headgear.
Interesting. I hadn't heard of that.
But so Paul was there with Mettenberger because it was probably what. When did you leave? When did you leave UGA? Like what?
He was just there for
month?
the 1 year,
He
09.
was just there for the 09 season. So yeah, they played in Shreveport.
So December, January.
Yeah, January. So
Okay,
Mettenberger
so
was there. Yeah, he was a jokester. I remember. He wasn't injured much, so I don't remember hanging out with him too much. But I do remember him being a major prankster. But he transferred.
Mettenberger?
Yeah, he transferred to LSU, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Well, I was just about to say. So Paul, like about 4 or 5 months after you left, I'm not blaming you, but like 4 or 5 months after you left, Zach got into some trouble that caused him to have to transfer to LSU.
Yeah, I would like to think that we kept him out of trouble.
Exactly.
I'm
not blaming you, but
yeah,
right. Yeah, we credit Paul for that not happening in 2009.
yeah.
Awesome.
That was a sad story because he was one of those guys. He was the heir apparent. Like he was supposed to be the guy.
Well, and his mom worked there. Like his mom was worked in Buttsmere.
Yeah.
So I think we ended up okay with Aaron Murray, though.
I was going to say, I remember getting to know. Unfortunately for Aaron, I got to know Aaron pretty well, and he was just a unbelievable class act. You know, people talk about, I wonder if that guy is the same on camera as he is off camera, or same off camera as he is on camera, and just an outstanding guy. Great family background. I think I actually met his parents one time. You know, when he was coming back from a shoulder and elbow injury, I had the chance to like throw with him a little bit. We would throw a Nerf ball in the workout facility first, and then we went out on the field. And I remember telling him, like, you know, okay, go easy on me. I know you could probably break my hand here. And I remember thinking, he's just flicking the ball, and I'm like acting like I'm dodging bullets. Just a class act guy. AJ Green was there. And had a couple injuries, so I got to know him. Was just an unbelievable guy, very humble. You know, what's interesting is all the guys that had the reasons, had a lot of reasons to be cocky and kind of prideful were super humble guys, and then the guys that maybe didn't have as much reason to be the cocky ones were the more cocky ones. So I always found that fascinating.
Yeah. That kind of gels with my recent experiences of being able to meet a bunch of former players and everything, and everyone's been so nice. So that's always, I don't know, that always makes you feel good. So Sorry, John, what were you saying?
I was just going to interject on a little bit of podcast connection / what he's talking about. So Aaron Murray and Drew Butler, who was also on that 2009 roster, I believe that he won the Ray Guy Award in 2009, which I'm not sure if you had any interactions with him during that year, but Aaron Murray and Drew Butler started a podcast together. Oh gosh, I'm blanking on it.
Punt and Pass.
Punt and Pass.
I guess you haven't been listening this season, John.
Punt and Pass has not been the same without Aaron Murray, in my opinion. But
okay, I was going to say, yeah. That's why I made that joke, because it's Jake Fromm. It's Jake Fromm now. So
it's
sorry,
Jake Fromm.
Sorry,
yeah.
I digress.
Didn't Aaron get into the broadcast business? I mean, is he not in that anymore?
He is. He actually changed that up a little bit. He has a new, different podcast though with T. Bob Hebert is why he left that podcast. But yeah, and he's with like SEC Network in some capacity this year.
I actually ran into him. I don't know, a couple years ago, because he spoke at one of the events that our company was at, and I walked up to him afterwards and talked to him for a while, and just, you know, he remembered me, but also, like, you know, thanked me for some of the stuff that we'd done. Just a great guy, a super wholesome guy.
Awesome, cool.
Golly, that roster was still like so interesting to me, because like there's so many guys that I would just sit here and be like, ooh, like what was Ben Jones like?
Oh my God.
Rennie Curran is a big UGA media member now.
Ben Jones, and Rennie Curran. Actually, I have a story about Rennie Curran, but Ben Jones was one of my favorite guys on the team.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like that's a personality right there.
He was a former wrestler, and John, you know that I was a former wrestler, and
Yes.
he and I hit it off really well. But I used to back then. I used to take high school sports medicine classes over to the facility at UGA and let them tour. And then Ron was super gracious to talk to them. So I did that every year for a couple of years. When Kirby joined the Bulldogs, he put a stop to that, understandably. I think he was concerned about maybe the optics of maybe recruiting infractions, since I was taking high schoolers over there, even though none of them were really athletes. But I think he tightened the screws on the whole program. But I remember standing outside the training room one day, and I was with a bunch of people and a couple of teachers that were huge Bulldog fans. And I remember thinking, and we actually told them, hey, you can't take pictures. You're going to probably see a couple athletes in there, maybe a couple superstars, and you just kind of you can't act starstruck. You can't ask for their autograph. We're walking through, they're getting treatment. And I didn't even know who was in there. Of course, lo and behold, we walked in and it was like every superstar on the team was in there. And Rennie Curran was one of the guys on the table, and one of the teachers pulls out a camera and starts taking pictures. And like this, they just didn't hear it. Yeah, they were starstruck. Yeah. And I remember afterwards we walked out of the facility and we're walking down like on the other side of Buttsmere, and Rennie Curran actually like went out of his way and came outside and signed some autographs and took more pictures, and because he heard us getting onto her for taking pictures, so he felt bad about it.
That's crazy.
Well, dude, Rennie seems like one of the most genuine dudes out there. Like I've heard him talk so many times, and he's just so polite. He's just so even keeled. Like, he's one of the great UGA ambassadors, in my opinion.
Yeah, I got to work a good bit with I cannot think of his name right now. You guys will know the place kicker who plays for Minnesota now.
Blair Walsh.
Yeah. He was. He had a couple injuries that year, so I got to know him a little bit. But he was a great guy, and I assume he's still in the NFL now, right?
I don't know if he's still there.
I'm not sure if he is. Yeah.
But he did. He was at one point. You're correct. He was at one point on the Vikings. But like amongst him, like I mean, you just run down that entire roster, Jim. I don't know if you've got. I just pulled up the 2009 roster, and it's just like, oh my gosh, like what did we do?
Yeah, it kind of makes you wonder how he went like 8-5 or whatever.
Joe wasn't exactly the shining star quarterback at the time.
But to in his defense, like last year, you could say Stetson wasn't exactly the shining star, but like you had a defense that was full of NFL talent.
Yeah, that's my quick rant. Is again, Joe Cox was not the problem of that team. That team gave up. The defense couldn't stop anybody. With a lot of talent, as you're seeing on the roster. I feel like I kind of want to like Paul. I feel like we need to do this again and have an oral history of the 2009 football season.
Was Martinez the DC there? I can't even remember.
He was. Yeah.
Oh my god.
I don't remember a whole lot of details, but I remember a lot of yelling.
I just got triggered.
Yeah.
That was right near the end, actually. Also, because
that had to have been near the end. Yeah,
we made the switch to Grantham. I can't remember if it was 10 or 11, but
I dodged the bullet a little bit that year because the next year after I left, they moved the entire. It wasn't the locker room, but the entire sports medicine facility and all the workout facility into trailers, because that was before they built the new facility that they're in now. Going back to tour the facility after they finished it versus what we were in before is unbelievable. Those facilities are amazing.
Nice. Yeah.
I can only imagine.
Right. Yeah. I know it has come a long way. The financial backing has changed significantly. It was starting to change towards the end of Richt era, and now it's completely different.
Well, and I think what I've heard and what I heard when Kirby first got there was that was one of the first things he did is he went to the team and went to the boosters and went to the AD and said, if you want to compete with Alabama, you're not going to do it with these facilities. And they restructured even the locker rooms at the stadium when I was there in 2009 was awful. It was like a just one big concrete room. And now to go back, we toured with PT Solutions being a sponsor. We went to a corporate event last year where they actually had Top Golf. We were hitting golf balls onto the field at
Oh
Samford.
yeah.
But we got to
So
tour
cool.
the new facility, and we had dinner with Kirby, and we got to kind of go behind the scenes. And those facilities are unbelievable. I mean, just night and day from what they were, changing into their uniforms back in the day. But yeah, I think Kirby brought a sense of urgency around the facility upgrade.
Well, it actually was Pruitt. Pruitt was the one that put it on blast.
Yeah, at the tail. That was at the tail end of Rick. Pruitt made some very public comments. So that's kind of around that time where I was saying where it started to change, but it is still it's even more different now since Kirby got there. He's pretty been pretty demanding on that. Yeah. So which is good. Good for Georgia. We are reaping the benefits.
Yeah, we are currently reaping the benefits. I'm gonna put a screenshot in the chat here, Jim, that will probably get you nice and triggered.
Okay.
You guys continue.
Well, I would say with reaping the benefits, one thing we didn't even mention is that the new polls did come out today, and we have surpassed Alabama. We are now number one, so we're both defending national champions and current number one team in the country.
I've kind of got the sense that that's not a good thing, or maybe Kirby wishes that you guys stayed at the two or three mark for the remainder of the year.
I would agree that he considers that to be rat poison.
Yeah, that's good usage of words.
I have a feeling that Saban is just happy as can be with that situation because he's going to take an edge off of that and just ride that into the ground for the rest of the season, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So, John, you sent me. Are you just being frustrated with the amount of NFL players that were on that team? What is this?
The offensive line. You look at the roster. Just look at the roster, and it's like there's no offensive line.
Yeah, that's funny.
They don't have it listed.
There was a guy. I don't know if it's showing up on your screen. The Trenton Sturdivant.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Poor guy.
He got hurt in 2008, and that was when he tore his ACL, in preseason or whatever. And then, so I'm assuming he was still rehabbing while you were there, right?
He tore it again. He tore it a second time. And then I think I had heard, I have to go back and read, I'm pretty sure he tore it a third time. And his career was pretty much over after that.
Yeah. I mean, he was like the prototypical left tackle, he was supposed to be the anchor of the line.
He was a giant. I mean, he was humongous. Yeah.
Yeah.
But just plagued with injuries.
Okay. Well, I don't know, Paul. I do think we only need to have you back. I could talk to you all day.
Full transparency, Jim was like, I feel like we're going to want to talk to him forever. So, I don't know how I feel about editing 2 full episodes.
I did make that comment.
It's interesting to talk to Jim, somebody like yourself that can remember every little detail about everything. And
Paul, you've come to the right place.
Yeah. And I wish I have, obviously I have a whole slew of pictures from my time there, but I wish my only regret is not writing stuff down or somehow documenting more of stories. Cause I feel like every single game, like I talked about, Oklahoma State had a story behind it. The Auburn game had a story behind it. Every game, I actually didn't go. I didn't travel to Shreveport. Is one of the only games I didn't go to.
Okay. Yep.
But it was,
You probably didn't realize. In your defense, you just didn't realize what you were walking into.
Yeah, I mean, you have to kind of get yourself in the mindset of not being starstruck.
Yeah.
I mean, Herschel Walker would commonly come stand next to me on the sideline, and I said,
I can't even.
Yeah, there were so many famous people, and Vince Dooley would regularly hang out with us in the training room, and Catherine Richt, and so you kind of have to just get your mindset in that this is just a ho hum kind of thing. But
It's just
looking
how it
back,
is.
yeah, and looking back, I'm like, man, I should have taken more pictures, and I should have should have snuck in a couple autographs from, especially like AJ Green or somebody like that, or even I did rehab on Stafford just one time when he came back. But we were trying very vigilantly not to be those like groupies while also taking care of the athletes.
Right. Yeah. No,
I can understand that. Yeah. You got a job to do.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And there's, I don't know, I still feel a bit of that sometimes, even with everyday things, right? So kind of you were relaying things just to parenting earlier, right? Like I sometimes am like, oh, I wish I had recorded some moment, a certain moment or whatever. But then at the same time, it's like, well, but then I would have been recording it and I wouldn't have been enjoying it. So I have a lot of things like that, not the same, but still similar there. I can relate to that. And
so even in your previous life, you're like, should we be recording?
Right. Yeah. Seriously. That's awesome. Yeah. So true. So true. Yeah. I don't know. I would say, you know what, you could at least, you could kind of like
write a memoir.
Do a blog. Yeah. Just start writing it down now, as much as you could remember now to keep that. There are a lot of things that are out there these days.
You've gotten like what, 30, 40 minutes worth of talking in here, and we haven't even scratched the surface.
Hey, we've preserved some of it for you here.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, what I really probably need to do is have somebody like you guys like go through each game and that remember all the details. And they're like, oh yeah, like even when you mentioned like a Ben Jones, I'm like, oh my gosh, that brought back a slew of memories.
A whole slew of memories, yeah. like, hold on, Paul, do you remember when he like dug up the turf at Georgia Tech Stadium?
We had pictures of him, like, I remember distinctively that year. It was like a week before I had kept it pretty quiet that I had grown up a Georgia Tech fan.
I was trying to not even mention that, Paul.
I can't imagine why.
The week before, I think somehow it came up. I don't know if my buddy Ben Seagraves had mentioned something, or we were all kind of pretty comfortable with each other, and it got mentioned in passing, and they just laid it on me. And it was the week before the Tech game, and that was, you guys remember Tech. Georgia just hammered Tech that year, and when I was with the Samford football team, Samford actually played Georgia Tech, and I remember thinking, this feels weird to be on the wrong side, and then I had to do it again with Georgia, and then going back into the locker room, and just the party that they were having, the celebration was insane. Yeah. I mean, just the craziness, and then the governor comes in and presents the governor's trophy. Some of the pictures that I have from that.
And Georgia Tech was supposed to win that game.
Oh yeah,
they were more highly ranked, and we like out of nowhere just ran all. That was the Caleb King, and Washaun Ely.
Was that We Run the State?
That was the We Run the State game.
Yeah.
You were there for the We Run the State game on the UGA sideline. Thanks a lot, Paul.
Yeah. I did what I could for behind enemy lines kind of thing, right?
Behind enemy. What was your dad think? What did your dad say to you after the game?
Well, he tried to view it through the lens of a professional opportunity.
I love it. Because if you don't know, if Fripp Dog is he's a big UGA alumni. Paul's dad is Georgia Tech alumni that way.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. He's a hardcore fan. Yeah, for sure. Had season tickets forever. So yeah, and also I married into a big Tennessee family, and if you guys remember, that was the year that Tennessee beat Georgia, and it was. I mean,
I don't remember this. I don't remember this at all.
Sanford Stadium is loud, but it doesn't compare to being on the field in Tennessee, especially when Tennessee is winning a game against a team that they probably, I guess at the time it was maybe a toss-up.
We were struggling that year, but no, I totally agree. That's the loudest stadium I've ever been to personally.
Oh yeah,
there's like what 130,000 people,
and it's very vertical. The upper deck is like straight up, and I think it keeps the sound. Yeah. That's my theory.
So try walking back into my in-laws' house where there's lots and lots of Tennessee fans while I'm wearing my Georgia, yeah.
And you're like, I don't even like these guys.
It's just a perception thing for me. Don't shoot the messenger.
Oh, that's awesome.
And
All right,
then
before I forget, I feel like My God a Podcast has to call dibs on this 2009 retelling. You
Seriously.
said to go through game by game. That could be
The game by
side.
game 2009. Yeah, that's a good idea for the My God Podcast stories in the off season, Paul.
Exactly. Yeah, that would be some money.
Because I can promise you, Jim's probably got red and black newspapers from 2009.
No, I had graduated. I have like John says that I'm a hoarder, which like what I like to say that I'm a collector.
I was going to say you got a few things on those shows.
Yeah, I got all kinds of stuff in there. I have all the things. New addition is the national championship Coke bottles. That's a new addition to the room. So
Nice. My token, one of my token takeaways, and I think I still have it somewhere, is the Capital One Bowl watch, which you guys are probably asking yourself, well, they didn't go to the Capital One Bowl when
I was about to say, wasn't it the Independence Bowl?
Yeah,
it was a gift because one of the bands that we were doing rehab broke, and the carabiner shattered my watch. So Ron gave me one of the Capital One Bowl watches as a gift.
Oh, that's funny.
For shattering. It was actually on Caleb King's ankle when it shattered my watch.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh wow, that's funny.
Yeah. So yeah, I'll have to. I haven't done that in a while. I have to go back and look. Or is this what you sent, John? The screenshot of the roster?
No, it was just the offensive line. But yeah, it was one of the links that I clicked on. I could probably find a more official.
I say that's just incomplete.
Yeah, it's got to be incomplete. But
that was like notable players.
There's a guy named Ely. Was Sean Ely? Was he on that?
Sean Ely.
Yeah, he was here that year. Yeah. Him and Caleb King were the ones that had all the rushing yards in that tech game.
Do you remember Brandon Smith?
Yeah. Yeah, he was like punt returner, wasn't he, or kickoff returner?
He was Mr. Electric. He was supposed to be our version of Percy Harvin
or Peter Ward
back then.
Yeah. He was a speedster.
And I have a personal. When we go through the 2009 season with you in the off season, Brandon Boykin was one of my personal favorite dogs of all time.
Fayetteville, right?
From Fayetteville, yeah.
Yeah, he punched me on the sideline one time.
I think you just got the cold open, Jim.
Now,
what?
It was an accident.
Okay.
He had just. I have to remember. Maybe when we retell the story, I have to remember what game it was. We have to go back and look. He just ran a kickoff back for a touchdown.
Of course he did, because that's what he did.
Yeah.
Then he came to the sideline and he was cramping. So I was like working on his leg or whatever, and he was so jacked up because the fans were like still fired up. He stood up and did like the, like get the fan, whatever. And he like locked me up underneeth my chin.
Oh my
God. I was like, and I like grabbed him and I was like, dude, you just punched me in the face. He's like, oh, just really excited.
Oh, that's awesome. I don't know how we can end any better than that.
Seriously, like that's a good segue because that's the kind of stuff you're going to get when we do this dissection. I have a feeling it's going to be an epic conversation.
Yeah, seriously. Oh man, Paul, this has been incredible. And yeah, just like what John was saying, I did say that, but I'm so glad you agreed to come on graciously share. Honestly, both. I mean, you shared some insight for Georgia Samford. That was great too. Really appreciated that. And just to share John always likes to ask, yours is tangential, but like whenever we have guests on, John always likes to ask, what is your Georgia story? And you've got an incredible one for that year. So much appreciated.
Yeah. Happy to do it. It's been fun. And you guys have churned up some old memories. I'm going to have to go back and look at some old pictures, John, I'll shoot you over some pictures that I find here and tell some old stories.
If you got any pictures that we can tie into some social media posts, we'll definitely tie them into this. I was joking with Jim. I was like, what are we going to talk about with Samford? Obviously, we killed him, but like we gotta have something else for the folks. So this was fun. This was fun to go through. So we'll eke out some content out of Samford somehow, some way. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Well, with mentioning social, I don't know, like Paul, I do just want to give you a minute if there's anything you want to plug, or anything.
I'll plug it for
Have
him.
at it.
I'll plug
Have
it
at it.
for him.
Yeah.
PT Solutions. They're a great company. I mean, I jokingly say that, but like, I mean, Paul's been there for me personally. He's helped out our kids. We've been to PT Solutions over here in Marietta multiple times, and they're taking good care of my son. So, if you need some help, need some rehab, the PT Solutions crew is a good place to start.
Yeah,
Cool.
thanks. Yeah, we got about close to 80 locations in Georgia now. And, I assume you have listeners outside of Georgia too. So we've got locations about 450 across the country now. So ptsolutions.com, you can find a location near you. Should be easy to do.
Awesome. Excellent. All right. Well, quick programming note. We will be back later this week. I think pretty much back on our regular schedule to preview next week's matchup with the Gamecocks. As the Dogs can stay undefeated with the victory over Samford, and like we briefly touched about, have climbed back up to the number one team in all the land. So, but did just want to say once again, thanks, Paul, so much. We really enjoyed having you.
Yeah, enjoyed it, guys. Thanks for having me.
And you don't have to participate in this next part, but go Dogs.
Go Dogs.
I got my Samford Bulldogs I can pull for, right?
There we go.
Go for it.
There we go.